Hey friends, welcome back to Homestead on a Prayer. It's about that time of year where a lot of these seedlings need to start getting planted out in the garden. And so I thought before I really jump into the transplanting season, before I start getting a lot of the seedlings that I've been growing for the past weeks and months out in the garden, I thought it would be the perfect opportunity to basically give you guys an update on our winter sown seedlings. Now back in, I want to say January, I think, it was a while ago, towards the beginning of this year, definitely when we were really in the throes of winter, we did a winter sowing experiment together. So you can see I've got some of my milk jugs and things like that out here. So if you're interested in seeing the video where we planted these seeds together, we actually did a few of these milk jugs together, and as you can see, I did many more after that video. I can go ahead and link that below so that you can see what the process was, what the reasoning was for planting some of these seeds this way, and you can go kind of get a little bit of the before and after. So I'm just going to go through these different milk jugs, or I'm calling them milk jugs. These are really mostly water jugs or reused salad containers. I'm just going to go through these. I'm going to share with you what I planted, what's doing well, what's not doing well. I'll tell you up front that this was very mixed success. I'm going to say that overall this was successful, but I did have some plants that really didn't do well. So I'm just going to talk about which ones did well and which ones didn't, and why I think some of them probably could have done better than they really did. So I'm not going to go in any particular order. I'm just going to go in the order of what's closest to me. So this first one here is a poppy. This is called Lauren's Grape. I'm going to go ahead and open this up so that you can see what it looks like inside. It really is the time of year where, when the sun comes out, it's probably getting pretty hot inside these. I mean, these kind of work as a little greenhouse. So it really is the time of year when I should start opening these up anyway and start getting them hardened off. One of the benefits of planting seeds this way is that they're pretty far ahead in the hardening off process. Really, they're used to sun, they're used to fluctuation in temperatures. They are protected from wind and basically environmental factors like that. So it is a good time to start opening these up and getting them used to that, and getting them ready to transplant out into the garden. So I'm just gonna go ahead and open these up and show you what's going on inside. So this here is the Lauren's Grape poppy. As you can see, we had great germination with this. The seedlings look really strong and really healthy. I'm really excited about these. My one hesitation with these is I'm not sure how well they're going to transplant out into the garden. So I wanted to call this video an update rather than winter sowing results, because as you can see some of our results. You can see what germinated really well. You can see what seems to have done really well so far, but I still don't know how these plants are going to transplant. And in some cases, I'm going to be comparing them with seedlings that I started inside in a more traditional way. So the results will kind of be ongoing as the season goes on. Now, poppies are notorious for preferring to be direct sown, not really liking being transplanted. So as you can see, I planted these in little clumps and I tried to keep them separated from each other. So the thought behind doing that was that I should be able to scoop out a little clump and transplant each clump without disturbing the roots of the others too much. Hopefully that will help minimize transplant shock. So I will say, as far as germination and growth, the poppies look great. We'll just have to wait and see how well they transplant out to the garden. So the next container I have here is some calendula. I'm just going to go ahead and open this one up. So in this container here, you can see we have some mixed results. I have a few calendula plants that sprouted and look really good. These are actually lamb's quarters, which is a wild plant, kind of considered a weed. So some of these little ones that grew up are not actually what we're going for. I do have some calendulas that look really good, but I'm not sure if this is really how I'm going to grow calendulas in the future. Calendula is a really easy plant, both to start inside under the grow lights and also to direct sow in the garden. So I may give it one more try next year, but I did sow some of these calendula seeds inside under my grow lights, and I've had much better germination with those than with this winter sown method. I'll probably give it a try next year as well, because I feel like this should have done better than it did. But we'll see. If it doesn't do well again next year, then I'll probably stick to starting some inside under the grow lights and also direct sowing some. So here I have a couple jugs, which I'm not even going to bother opening because there really is no germination in here. This one is jet black hollyhock and this is peppermint chard. Both of the seeds that I used in these were a few years old, so I can't blame the lack of success on the winter sowing method for these plants. These are both plants that should, in theory, have been successful with this method, but the seeds were a few years old. So I'm going to guess that that is probably the reason why these weren't successful. I am going to keep these out on my deck a little bit longer and see if we get any late germination, but for the moment, these have not really been successful. So in this jug here, I have one of my favorite Asian greens. This is the name here. I'm not really sure how to pronounce it. It is somewhat similar to tatsoi, somewhat similar to spinach. As you can see, the plants that germinated look really, really nice. So I'm going to transplant these out into the garden and we'll see how they do with transplant. It is definitely the time of year when a lot of these cool weather plants should be transplanted out into the garden. So I probably should have done that a little bit sooner actually. But these plants are looking really healthy, so I'm really excited for how they're going to do out in the garden. So here I have a couple jugs with mixed success. So here you can see I have some tatsoi. This is another Asian green. And these look really good. I didn't get complete germination with these. I know I had some seeds and some of these bare spots too. The ones that did germinate look really good, so we'll see how they transplant out to the garden. This one was golden acre cabbage, which did not germinate at all. This, I think, was another case of the seeds being on the old side because I had been having trouble germinating these seeds last year as well, just using more traditional methods, and they didn't really germinate very successfully for me. So I figured that I would throw a bunch of my seeds into one of these jugs and try winter sowing them. Wasn't really successful, but I don't think that was the method because I think that cabbage is something that should be successful. And you know, I should mention, I actually do have a couple containers of winter sown seedlings that are not here because I transplanted some of them out into my garden yesterday. I had some broccoli and I had a different variety of cabbage, which was not a complete success, but definitely more successful than this one. The broccoli looked really good, so we'll keep an eye on that as the season goes on and compare it to the broccoli that I started inside. I will link that video below in case you want to see how the broccoli seedlings looked. But for now, we'll continue on and I'll show you what I have up here on the deck. So in here I planted stock seeds, which is a flower, cool hardy flower. There might be one seedling in there. It's hard to tell. I can't tell for sure what it is yet, so I'm just going to keep this closed. I'm going to keep an eye on it. I'm thinking that this is probably not all that successful because stock really should have been started and, you know, fairly grown by now to be successful. But we're going to keep an eye on this and see what happens. In here I have lemon balm, and I have one lemon balm seedling that has sprouted, but it's a really recent sprout. So this is another one that I'm going to keep closed. I'm going to keep an eye on it. It's possible that this will work and the lemon balm may have just taken longer, but I did get at least one plant from it, which honestly for my situation was all I needed, but I did sow significantly more than one seed. So I'm not sure how the germination will be, but we're going to keep an eye on both of these, keep them closed, and see how they do. So in this container here, I have some little parsley seedlings. So we'll just open this up and get a closer look at these. So you can see that these seedlings are small, but they look really healthy. So I think that this is probably going to be fairly successful. I don't know what this is. This just planted itself in here. But these with the little frilly leaves here, these are all parsley seedlings. Parsley is a plant that I would definitely like to switch to growing only with winter sowing methods if possible. So if these are successful, if they transplant well and grow into healthy plants, then I'll be really happy about this because the more space that I can free up under my grow lights, the better. Space is definitely at a premium in my house, and parsley takes quite a while to germinate in the house and then grows really slowly. So if I'm able to grow it this way instead, that would definitely be much improved. So in this container, I have Chinese yellow heart choy, which I want to say is a relative of pak choy. You can see I have a few plants that look beautiful, a couple that are looking good but are really small. I did not have the best germination. I'm still overall fairly happy with this because this is a seed that I have had trouble germinating in the house, in the garden. I don't know, I think it just didn't have a really high germination rate. So maybe 50% of the seeds in here germinated. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to try to grow these out in the garden and see how they do. I might try seeing if I can grow one of these to seed, save my own seeds, and see if I get better germination from a specific plant that is acclimated to my garden. So stay tuned for that. We'll see what happens with that. For the meantime, I'm just hoping that these plants transplant well and are successful. So here I've got a couple jugs of seedlings that were not all that successful for different reasons. Here I have orange Swiss chard, which didn't germinate. I'm going to keep this out here a little bit longer and see if it does germinate. I can't remember exactly how old the seeds are. They might be 3 years old, so they're a little bit on the older side. So that could possibly be a reason. Although Swiss chard does usually do fairly well with winter sowing, so it could just be because the seeds are older. In here I have Romanesco broccoli, which actually did look really well. Somehow I keep all these containers on my deck. My chickens come up on the deck periodically, and they knocked this over, and I don't really know exactly what they did with it. They couldn't get into it, but all the seedlings got all tangled up together and didn't really end up being that healthy. I've got, I think, 3 seedlings in there that I can still see. I'm going to keep them in here a little bit longer and see if they're strong enough to recover, but I don't know if they are. Either way, that's not the fault of the winter sowing method or the seeds. That's the fault of my mischievous little chickens that like to go exploring on my deck. So in this container here, I've got some dill, and don't mind the loud noise of this tape ripping off. So these dill seedlings look really good. They've sprouted really well and grown really nicely. Dill has a reputation for not really liking to be transplanted that much. So this is one where the seedlings look great. I'm going to have to wait and see, before I consider this a complete success, I'm going to have to wait and see how the transplant process goes. But I thought it would be a fun experiment. So far, these are looking good. So I'm going to transplant these out into the garden before they get too large, and we'll see how well they make the transition. In this container here, I have skullcap, which is a medicinal herb. It says that it requires cold stratification, which basically means that for the seeds to sprout, they have to feel like they've gone through winter. They need to have a cold period and then sprout. Those type of seeds are ideal for winter sowing because that's basically what you're doing. You're leaving them outside and they're basically mimicking the natural cycle that they would go through. Well, really, they're actually going through the natural cycle, but they're just doing it in this protected environment. So I actually wasn't sure what was going to happen with these because even though they had that cold stratification period, and it is a hardy plant, so should have no problem germinating once it's been through its cold period, it hadn't really been doing much. But actually today I'm looking in there and there's a bunch of tiny seedlings in there. I actually don't know what skullcap seedlings look like when they're this small, but there's so many of them that I'm thinking it must be skullcap. I'm not sure what else it could be in there. So I'm going to keep this how it is. We're going to let it sit a little bit longer and see how it does, and I'll update you on this as the season goes on. All right, in this jug here, I've got perpetual spinach, which is a type of Swiss chard. You can see there's just 2 little seedlings there. They look pretty good, but there's only 2. But I'm wondering if the fact that those 2 just germinated means that there is hope for my orange Swiss chard as well. So I'm going to keep both of these going a little bit longer and see if we get any more germination. Maybe the Swiss chard is just taking a little bit longer to germinate. In here, I have some kale, which you can see a little bit. I will say I've got Russian red kale and dazzling blue kale, which is a lacinato type. You can probably see those fairly well through here. I will say that all the seedlings that germinated look great. They look really healthy. I didn't get as good germination as I would have expected though, because my kale did germinate really well for me. These same seed packets germinated really well for me inside. I'm going to say this is mixed results here. At least in my area, I would say chamomile is the ideal winter sowing plant. You know, it's a cool season annual. Germinates really well in cool conditions, grows well in cool conditions, but doesn't mind a little bit of heat either. So this one, you know, I first tried winter sowing chamomile last year, and it was so successful that I did not even try starting any chamomile inside my house this year because I trusted this method completely when it came to chamomile. So I have 2 containers of it. How I'm planning to transplant these out, as you can see, there are so many tiny seedlings, I can't really separate them from each other. So I'm just going to break them into little clumps, and then I'll transplant little clumps of seedlings together out in the garden. Chamomile doesn't really mind being a little bit crowded. It's so wispy that really you can have multiple plants together and it's completely fine. So this chamomile will be going out in the garden really soon and hopefully making lots of delicious tea for us as the season goes on. It's also really good at attracting pollinators and just looks beautiful in the garden. Definitely a must-grow plant, and if you are trying winter sowing, it's a great candidate for that. So in this container here, I have Alyssum, which was not as successful as I hoped. Alyssum seems like it would be a great candidate for winter sowing. I think that what happened with the Alyssum was I think that I probably planted it a little bit too early. It is a cool season annual. It is fairly cold hardy, but I think I may have planted it too early and it might have gotten a little bit too cold for it, because I think what happened was I think the majority of the seeds germinated and then we had a really cold snap. I don't really remember how cold it was, but it was probably 20 degrees, maybe even cooler than that, which is a little bit too cool for Alyssum, especially that's just germinated. So I think that Alyssum, anyway, after that, I do have some seedlings in here, which I think germinated later after that cold snap. So I think what I'm going to do with Alyssum next year is I think I am going to try winter sowing it again, but I'll probably wait a little bit later into the season so that it doesn't germinate quite so early. You know, weather here in Connecticut, like I'm sure many other places as well, is very unpredictable. Sometimes we tend to have fairly cold winters, but sometimes we get mild stretches in the middle of those cold winters. And I think that's what happened. I think we got the mild stretch, which was, you know, exaggerated by being in this container. The Alyssum thought it was spring and germinated, then we had the really cool snap. So I think that while it is a fairly tough plant, it's not quite as tough as I thought. So anyway, I'm gonna try it again next year and we'll see if it does a little better. So I'm just gonna open this up. We'll take a look at what's inside and see how it actually did do. So I've got a variety of seedlings in here. These are not all Alyssum. This looks like chamomile. So I'm guessing some chamomile seeds must have made their way in. This looks like lamb's quarters, which is, you know, a common weed. And this might be Alyssum. You know, I'm not actually 100% sure. So I think I might just keep an eye on this one a little bit longer and see what happens. So in this container here, I have another variety of poppy. I'm gonna just open this up and see how it looks. So this is the mother of pearl variety of poppy, and it really looks pretty similar to the other variety. Seedlings look great, nice and healthy, had good germination, so we'll just have to see if these transplant well. Poppies are a little bit tricky. You know, they prefer to be direct sown, but I have not always had a lot of success with them in the garden. It's kind of hit or miss, and I think it kind of depends on the type of winter and early spring that we have. Some years I've had beautiful poppies, and some years I haven't had any. So I'm hoping if they transplant well with this winter sowing method, I'm hoping this could be the answer and maybe we can reliably have beautiful poppies every year. This is a mixed variety. It's mother of pearl, which has a variety of colors in it. So I'm really excited to see how these actually look when they bloom. So in here, I'm not gonna open up this container. This is another variety of Alyssum. I think this is the purple. I think the other one we looked at was white Alyssum. And it's basically the same story. You know, germinated a little early, didn't make it, but I think there's a couple mixed seedlings in here. I think a couple of them may be Alyssum. So I'm gonna keep this container intact, and we'll just monitor it as the season goes on. Hopefully I get some Alyssum that does well. 3 jugs, which were not successful. I have scarlet kale here. I think that was a seed issue because those seeds were fairly old. I hadn't been having good germination with them anyway. Serbian bellflower. This is from a random packet of seeds that I found. I have no idea how old it was, and I just threw it in here to see if it would sprout. And these were snapdragons, which I don't see any germination in there, but those seeds were a little old, and I was also having germination problems with those too. So there were several varieties of seeds that I was not having great germination with, but I figured if I overseeded them, if I just threw maybe the rest of the seed packet into one of these jugs and put it out for the winter to see what would happen, it certainly wouldn't hurt anything. If it didn't germinate, then I could just add the soil into, you know, my container garden out here. So I didn't have any success with any of those. I think there actually might be 1 or 2 of the scarlet kale seedlings in there. They don't look all that healthy, so I'm going to monitor and see what happens. For some reason in my area, I have trouble growing scarlet kale. Other kales do really well and thrive, but I've just not had great luck with scarlet kale. So I'm not sure the reason for that, but I'm just gonna keep those jugs that I just showed you, just how they are, and we'll leave them out here a little bit longer and see what happens. Give them a little more time. So in this container, I have a couple more Asian greens. I've got pak choy on this side and kamatsuna, if I'm pronouncing that right, on this side. And these look really nice. So I'm excited to transplant these to the garden and see how they do. So cool season vegetables like these are generally a really good choice for winter sowing. So I'm glad to see that these have done really well. I'm going to transplant these out into the garden within the next couple days, and hopefully we'll get a good harvest from these. I think this is the last container that we haven't gone through. I'm trying to keep track of all my containers out here. So So I'm just going to open this up. This is yarrow, which is a perennial plant that grows wild in my area anyway. Perennials that grow in your area without any human intervention are also really good candidates for winter sowing because they're acclimated to the area. And I will tell you before opening this that this has done really well. So we're just going to open it up and take a look. So as you can see, this yarrow looks really good. So this is a great, useful plant to have. So yarrow does come in a lot of really beautiful colors. It can be really decorative. I just got the classic, original white version, the kind that grows wild around here, because I'm not growing it for its beauty, although the white version is really pretty too. I'm growing it because it's also a really useful plant. It's really useful medicinally, and I also have some plans to use this in some apple tree guilds that I'm in the process of planting over in my yard. So we'll be talking about those more in a future video, but for now I just wanted to show you the update on my yarrow. So I think that's everything. It's possible that I missed something with all these containers on my deck. So thank you for hanging out with me today as we just took a little look at the update, the current state of all these winter sown plants. I am really enjoying winter sowing because, you know, it's a way to garden in the winter. It also frees up a lot of space under my grow lights. So definitely check back. This is not the final results. This is just the in progress update. So as the season goes on, I'll see how well these transplant out into the garden, and I'll see how well they do. So if you're interested in seeing that too, definitely check back. I'll be doing some more videos, definitely some garden tours where you can watch these plants as they grow. So I hope you're having a great day. Hope you're enjoying spring weather where you live, and I can't wait to see you soon. I'll see you next time.